Thank you for listening to the BjjBrick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back to the BjjBrick Podcast. This is episode 280. We have a great interview with Jared Dopp. This episode, really excited to bring him to you guys, and he's really an amazing person. He's a PhD student, elite level competitor. He's doing what we all try to do sometimes, is juggle busy lives and do grappling at the best of our abilities, and he's definitely someone to look up to. So we got that for you as well. Hey guys, this is Byron coming at you from the audio editing room. I got to get in here early to let you guys in on something before the show actually gets started. Joe and I are playing a prank on Gary, so before the interview, after the interview is when the prank will be happening. We're going to be throwing out kind of old TV show titles like Groin Pains, Three's Company, Love Boat, and those sort of things, and seeing how many of them Gary could catch us on. And just want to let you guys know in advance, you could enjoy it as it goes through, and you're not surprised that we've mentioned 20 or 30 TV show titles and you didn't notice them, but watch. If Gary picks up, it's good. If he doesn't, that's also fun. So he doesn't know any of this is going on, but we'll see how it goes. Let's get back to the podcast. I'm here with my good buddies Joe and Gary. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing?
Once again, who are you calling a gentleman?
Well, I'm just trying to exchange some pleasantries between you guys here. And
well, I don't know.
It must be you, Gary, my good friend. You must be the gentleman.
I don't know. When me and Byron get on the mat, I don't know how much gentlemanly it is when Byron takes that fist and starts poking into my throat and elbows to the eye socket. I turn into another person. But
when there's three of us, Three's Company, and with Joe and you and me, we're all good friends.
Okay, you keep telling yourself that, Byron.
Good times, Gary. Good times. Quickly want to mention that we do have a audio book that's available for you guys, especially those in their first year of training, or if you're thinking about training, really want to present this to you and get you the opportunity to avoid some of the challenges that I faced, and I think everybody faces unnecessarily. The book is called Your First Year of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's $11.99. There's a link to it in the show notes, and it's going to help you from everything from finding the right gym for you all the way to if you want to compete, some advice in your tournament. So it's about 2.5 hours long, and it's basically, I'm going to sit down with you basically how it works and talk to you about your first year of training in audiobook format. So I appreciate all those who have got that in the past, and hopefully it will continue to help people in the future, and that person might be you.
One of the things people struggle with initially when they start to jiu-jitsu is their evening classes. You go to class, you get physically and mentally sort of riled up. You come home, you're excited about what you learned. You're trying to brainstorm what to do better next time, and it's hard to sleep. This book will really help you out if you are in that situation.
Joe.
It really.
I'm just kidding, guys.
It's a multi-use book.
There are dozens of benefits to this book. Go ahead and pick this up for you if you're in your first year of jiu-jitsu. If you're not and you know somebody else who is, or maybe you've got a friend that you're trying to talk into doing jiu-jitsu, this would be a great gift for them. So well worth the money. Go ahead and pick up a copy.
I want to give a little story here, kind of like what Joe was talking about. And it did put me to sleep, too, when I got it, or when my teammate got it. And let me tell you what happened. My teammate was having trouble with his rear naked choke. He basically got this book, this audio book, and he just basically learned to slow down, pay a little bit more attention to the coach. He figured out all the little things that he was doing wrong by slowing down and paying attention to the coach. And when we got on the mat, it actually made me go to sleep. So there's two different ways it can put you to sleep, the good way and the bad way. And I think I got put to sleep the good way. So good job, Byron.
I do what I can, I suppose. Didn't realize that had happened, Gary, but I'm proud of those that have listened to it and have learned from it.
So, guys, that brings us to our life lesson. And this is typically something that we've learned from our daily experiences, and then we bring it onto the mats. Sometimes we take it the other direction. If you're a regular listener to the show, you caught that Byron brought the life lesson last week, and he was talking about going into a toxic environment at work, and not the same kind of toxic environment that Gary might go into as a banker, but Byron's a firefighter.
He keeps his office door open a lot to air it out.
No. We actually have dye packs in our money, so you can get that in the air. It can get into your eyes and get into your throat. So it could be brutal swallowing some dye.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, that was a great life lesson, Byron.
Gary's got to keep law and order down there.
Somebody's got to do it, man. Anyway. That was a great lesson that Byron brought, and it kind of revolved around a piece of equipment that tells him whether or not the atmosphere is safe and whether it's fit to support human life. And one of the things I do in my job as a safety officer for an offshore supply company is I provide ongoing training for the mariners on the boats. And we do working at height training. What do you need to do to keep yourself safe as you're 20, 30 feet up on scaffolding, hot work permits. And we do confined space entry and rescue training as well. And we use the same type of devices that Byron was talking about to determine whether or not the atmosphere is safe for human entry. And one of the things we talk about in our training is that 50% of the deaths that are associated with confined spaces are not the original entrants. It's people that go in after an incident has occurred to rescue the first people. If you're walking by a tank and you look in the tank and you see somebody that's down on the floor, what's your first reaction, Gary?
I'm going to run in there and help them out.
Exactly. That's pretty much everybody's first reaction. One of the examples that we use in the training course that I offer, there was a ship that had a sewage pipe that ran through a ballast water tank. So when you went into the tank, you'll see a couple of pipes will go through. You'll see a fuel pipe was going through, freshwater pipes going through. Somehow you've got to get product or waste material from one end of the boat to the other. So there's a sewage pipe that runs through this tank, and there's a coupling in there that they can open. And they had plugged up toilets. So they emptied the ballast tank, and they used the O2 sensor to determine the conditions in the tank were safe for entry. And they put somebody in there to open this coupling and put a snake in the tank to see where the obstruction might be in the sewage line. Once the guy opened the coupling, sewage produces H2S gas, which is deadly. And the H2S gas filled the tank that the guy was in, and he died. So after about an hour, his supervisor thought, man, I haven't heard from this guy. He was supposed to put a snake in the lines and come and tell me if he found the obstruction. So the supervisor goes to find the guy and sees him down in the tank and rushes in after him, and he dies as well. An hour or so later, the captain of the boat says, we haven't heard nothing from the engine department in a long time. They're never this quiet. So he gets a member of his deck department, and he says, go find these guys and see what's going on. So the guy goes down, he starts walking through the ship and looking for these guys. He finds an open tank cover, and he looks in, and he sees two guys on the floor. So he rushes in after them, and he dies as well. So now we have three dead people. The fourth guy, finally a fourth guy went and saw them, and it was like, whoa, wait a minute. Something's wrong. I need to get a self-contained breathing apparatus. I need to follow procedures. Finally, somebody decided to follow procedures. You got a self-contained breathing apparatus. Went in there, was able to drag the three guys out, but they had already died. So how this relates to jiu-jitsu, not to be too morbid, I guess this is morbid stuff.
Bringing us down, Joe.
Yeah, this is brutal. Rated R.
Didn't realize how morbid this was when I got going.
Usually, Joe, your stories are more Love Boat-like than Scary Boat.
Anyway, how this relates to jiu-jitsu, like Gary said, if he's walking by a tank and he sees somebody down in the bottom of the tank, his first reaction is to rush in and get them. And oftentimes that's the wrong reaction. And in jiu-jitsu, oftentimes while we're rolling, our first reaction is not the right one. We haven't weighed all the we haven't looked at all the possibilities or everything that's involved. And an example is, I caught a friend of mine, a white belt, in an Ezekiel choke the other night. I was top half guard, and I set everything up and then let him get the underhook, caught him in the Ezekiel choke, and he tapped, and then we rolled for the rest of the round. And then after the round, he was a little bit frustrated, and he says, well, so much for the underhook being the key to everything. And I said, it really is if you get it right, you set it up right. But I said, when a more experienced grappler, when you're rolling with a more experienced grappler and something seems to be too easy, it's probably a trap. So the whole lesson here is that oftentimes your first reaction can just lead you into trouble. When you're rolling with your coach and it's like, I've got this opportunity to pass his guard, if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah, with jiu-jitsu, that's like the facts of life. It's not an intuitive thing necessarily. Like Gary would rush in there and try to save them, and that's his instinct. If you could, I don't know how experienced each individual listener is, but think back to when you started. It's hard and it's confusing because it's not intuitive. And that's why we have to learn it. It sounds so oversimplified, but if this was intuitive, you could train by yourself. You wouldn't need a coach. You could just train harder. But we do need to learn these techniques that don't necessarily make sense to us, or we wouldn't have necessarily thought of on our own. That's why it's so important to have quality coaching. And like with your buddy who was like, well, the underhook didn't work. It does work. It's like nothing works all the time. And when the skill discrepancy or there's some other discrepancy categories, if they're off too much, it's not going to work real well. You might still get it work. Maybe he's not going to be a half guard person. but
I like what you're saying, Byron, about your coach. Pay attention to your coach. You're going to learn these things. It's not intuitive, but it's not going to the underhook is not going to work every single time. And I go back to me and Byron rolling a lot of times, and Byron knows I'm a big underhook person. If I'm on the bottom, I love the underhook. But Byron, one of our previous guests, Josh Hinger, Byron really caught on to Josh Hinger's Hingertine. Check out Byron's review of the Hingertine DVD on our BjjBrick YouTube page. Definitely check it out. It's awesome. It's great. But Byron really got into the Hingertine. And Byron would just basically give me the underhook, kind of like what Joe, you were doing with your partner the other day when you Ezekiel'd him. And Byron was giving me the underhook much easier than I would get it before, and I'd be like, oh, cool, nice easy sweep. And next thing you know, I'm gurgling like you wouldn't believe. Byron would lock that Hingertine on, and I was going to sleep. And it's just like it was too easy. I thought it was there. I thought, I'm heading down a path. But what I really liked about it is then I went home and I slowed down again. I just didn't rush into the tank. I slowed down again. I revisited everything in my head. I was like, okay, Byron's let me get this underhook. He's then trapping my arm, trapping my head, pinching my head down and turning his fingers up into or turning his knuckles up into my throat, and I'm choking. So what I had to do is figure out, because my underhook is my preferred way of getting up off the bottom. So then I had to figure out, as soon as I come up with the underhook, I have to scoop my body around a little bit to make the angle a little bit different. And then so I tried that, and I saw, hey, it works a little bit. Byron can jump right into the Hingertine. But that's what I love about jiu-jitsu is all of a sudden something's working great for me. Byron learns a way to stop that and put me to sleep. And then I got to go back to the drawing board and figure out a way to stop that. And I guarantee you Byron's going to come back to the drawing board and change his angle a little bit and put me back to sleep. And it's just it's a big process of everybody trying to outsmart each other. But as Joe says, we can't just go rushing in there. Everything's too good to, it's too good to be true. If we just rush in there without, our brain working and assessing that situation, we could put ourselves in some big trouble.
Yeah.
You know what the best thing about jiu-jitsu is, Gary?
The shirts, the rash guards.
No, unlike rushing into a confined space, you get a second chance.
Hey, that's perfect. And Joe, when you were telling your story, it made me think of a story that I had. And Byron and we train with a lot of police officers, and I work, as you guys know, in a bank there, and I don't work in the retail side, so I don't work in a branch. So basically, I don't really do all the robbery training and everything that everybody else does. I mean, we touch on it a little bit, but I hate to say it, I never really pay much attention to it. I'm office, I'm floors above a retail area,
literally.
Don't have anything to do with.
He's above
Literally.
that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not that way, Byron. I mean,
I know
a couple floors above where they, do retail space. But so one day I'm sitting there in my office, and I get a phone call on my cell phone, and I look down, and it's one of Byron and I's buddy who's a cop, and so I figured maybe he was gonna cancel training, or maybe he wanted to get a loan or something. I don't know. So I pick up the phone, and he's like, "Gary?" I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "It's Bob." And I was like, "Okay, cool. What's going on?" And he's like, "You guys got a silent alarm going on down at your branch. Is everything okay?" And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, there's a silent alarm. You guys having a robbery?" And my instincts just kicked in. I ran out of my office as fast as I could.
To the car.
I had my phone. I had my phone to my ear. I basically jumped down 2 flights of stairs. I mean, I just jumped, flew down. About right when I was about ready to get to the bottom floor, I started thinking, my head said, what am I going to do? But it still didn't stop me. I opened up the door that goes to the retail branch, and I still have to go a little bit farther and turn a left till I can get to where the teller lines are. And the only thing that popped into my head is I'm going to charge straight for the guy, and I'm going to change levels and double leg takedown. That's exactly what popped into my head. So I come flying around the corner as fast as I could. Still had no clue, no plan. Don't even know what I was ever trained to do. Everything just flew out the window. And like Joe was talking about, I just ran right into trouble. It actually wasn't trouble, but it could have been trouble. I come around the corner, and the only person at the teller line is 2 older ladies. So I run up there, and at this point, I was a little relieved because I was like, I don't think they're robbing it.
You're gonna be able to take them.
Yeah, I think I could take them.
Come on, Gary. We know you double A the heck out of that little old lady. So, Gary, I got to ask you, did you feel like you were on a Starsky and Hutch
my
episode,
adrenaline was flying so much. I guess I have that instinct that I want to protect my friends, my teammates. I consider work just like jiu-jitsu. These guys are my teammates, and I want to be in the middle of it. I don't want any of my teammates to go. But it also made me realize, like, as soon as that was done and I realized everything that was wrong, that I went to a retail manager, and I'm still fired up at this time. My adrenaline's flying, and I was like, I need training. I need to know what to do. I did everything wrong. But, I look back at it that it was actually, I'm glad it happened with not with a false alarm, because for me, I thought it was real. My adrenaline was pumping, but it made me stop and realize I got to listen to my coach. I've got to learn what my coach tells me to do, because I could have put more people in danger. More people could have maybe died because of stupid mistakes I did. And, it just made me realize I need to sit back. I need to learn, and I need to keep learning, learn over and over again, and drill it and, get it into my mind.
Yeah, Gary ran down there like Walker, Texas Ranger, ready to kick some butt.
Yeah.
Problem is, if I would have tried to kick him, I probably would have torn my hamstring.
Chalk that up to growing pains, man.
You got to learn.
I'll learn.
But I'm glad it happened in that situation. I really am glad it happened, because if it was a real robber there, it could have ended up terrible. But I think now I'm very well prepared, a lot more prepared, not very well prepared, but I'm going to strive to be very well prepared. And I've now started doing that with my staff too. personally, I don't think any of them would go down there. They're not as stupid as I am. But, yeah, kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of...
I would have been...
It's scary. You got to remember, when you enter that, it's the real world, man. Like, bad things can happen really fast.
I mean, it happens to a lot of good people. Look at those 3 people that Joe was on the boat with. Those were 3 smart people. They cared so much for the other person, and I would have been one of those guys. I tell you, if I was in Joe's boat, I would have been one of those guys that perished.
Well, and thank goodness, Gary, I was not actually on that boat.
Oh, okay, yeah. But you know what I mean? I can see that. Those people, they react to save the day versus, thinking, I like what you said, the last guy, like, oh, I need to do what I'm supposed to do. I need to put on, I think you called it a self-contained ventilation breathing system or something. I need to do
breathing
that.
Apparatus.
Yeah, I need to do that before I go in. And, that wasn't me. That wasn't the first 2 guys that came to save him. We're just like, man, I'm going to go in there with everything I got and save that guy because he's my buddy, instead of taking 1 second and replaying everything over in my head. This is what I learned. I need to do this to make sure I'm safe, and then maybe I can go in and save those 3 people.
Yeah, so something about both these things, like an alarm system. Like if they had a bell in there when the air was toxic, they could have been saved by the bell. Hey,
that's a good TV show.
Oh yeah, but I mean, it really, and the one that was sent out to the police was a silent alarm.
Yeah. But we can't always go by the bell, because let's think about your story for last week, that it didn't work properly.
It didn't work. The bell didn't work.
So that's why I think we need that training to, even if the bell's not working or the silent alarm or the whatever you had there, Byron, isn't working, we need to then just think, oh man, are we okay? Let's maybe hopefully our training we won't rush into it. It will be like, okay, what have I learned during training? What do I need to do? Let's take an extra second and make sure we're on the right path. Is that 1 second of me running in there going to be life or death? Or if I take an extra second, is that going to matter? Because maybe now I'm on the right path to try to save everybody.
Yeah, good life lesson, Joe.
Joe, I love that one. That's great.
Yeah, that is good. And I guess, we try and inch forward in our jiu-jitsu journey, or hope sometimes to get that quantum leap where you just, things just all kind of click and you move forward rapidly. But anyway, that's my contribution to the show today.
Yep, Joe, I was going to do a quantum leap takedown to the robbers if they happen to be there.
Yes, sir.
Problem is, it would have been like skeet shooting for them.
We've got just to spin this city around here, we've got a quote of the week here, and it's by Stephen Covey. Be patient with yourself. Self-growth is tender. It's holy ground. There's no greater investment. The first part of this, be patient with yourself. I think that's something that we all could have more of. If you ever have gone to train and it didn't go so well, you're driving home or you're on the train or however you get home, and you're frustrated with the progress of your jiu-jitsu, be patient with yourself. It's worth the investment, and I think that just that patience with yourself could allow you some time to get much better. But it also, that frustration is not a feeling you could feel every day when you leave jiu-jitsu and keep going in the long run. You've got to be patient with yourself. If you have a rough day, a rough tournament, a rough month or two or whatever, be patient. The mats are still there. You still have time to learn and get better.
I like this quote, Byron, and this is one that I think kind of illustrates how the on the mat, off the mat lessons kind of go back and forth, because this is a great thing to strive to learn in jiu-jitsu, to be patient with yourself. But it's also one of those things that jiu-jitsu just kind of teaches you naturally. I mean, if you stick with jiu-jitsu long enough, you're going to be eventually taught this lesson. It's just part of the training. It's part of progression. And Because it's very true off the mat as well. As you go through your parenting your kids, go through advancing throughout your career, it's never going to happen really as fast as you want it to. And you're going to have to be patient, and you're going to have to invest in your own progress. And I think jiu-jitsu does a great job of helping you learn that lesson.
You know what I like what you said there, Joe, is you're talking about, how much we learned from jiu-jitsu. And I just started thinking is, we've all went to high school and we all were going to school and we were learning stuff from our teachers at points. And, we start a new job, we learn a little bit there. And most people, a regular person who doesn't train jiu-jitsu or do something else, your learning kind of stops. Not necessarily it stops, you're still going, but it's almost like you don't have a teacher, a classroom. And it just made me think about jiu-jitsu, because you were talking about if you do jiu-jitsu, you're going to learn patience. And I can say I got out of school, and I don't think I was the most patient person. And, I picked up jiu-jitsu at 35 years old, and I've been doing it for a while now. But it's almost like I went back to school. This is what made me think about it, the way you explained it, Joe. I've went back to school, and I've learned so much in my life since I'm 35 on. And the majority of that is attributed to jiu-jitsu. I have a jiu-jitsu teacher, and all my teammates are teachers also. We learn stuff on the mat. There's no lying on the mat, and when I'm saying lying, I don't mean lying down on the mat. Everything's going to expose itself. But, one thing that jiu-jitsu has taught me is like what you're saying there, is patience. It's something I've gotten so much better at, because if you don't have that in jiu-jitsu, you're not going to last very long in it. And it's just kind of neat thinking about it, that I'm going to school. Next time somebody asks me, hey, you look like you're so old, you're probably out of school, I'd be like, no, I'm in school. I'm going to tell everybody I'm in school. And they're going to be like, hey, what kind of school are you at? Some kind of special school? Be like, no, it's jiu-jitsu. You want to come? But yeah, jiu-jitsu is awesome. I'm still learning today.
Yep. Gary will even pick you up and take you there in a magic school bus and deliver you and get you all your learning.
Yeah. And, another thing that goes by this is, Joe, I don't remember what it was, but I sent Joe a text here. He put up a post. I think it was on maybe our Facebook page, or maybe it was on his own page. But it was something about, sometimes we think we have a bad training day, or we just, we don't have everything in there. And I was having a day that I didn't think I had time to train and to train or to go to school, as I'm going to call it. I didn't think I had time to do that. And I read Joe's post, and I may not have had an hour and a half to go, and really I didn't feel all that great where I could put a monster effort into it. But I ended up working out, and I probably went 30 to 45 minutes, less than my normal time. But man, I felt so much better afterwards. And, as the workout started going, everything changed in my body, and I just started feeling, like I had a ton of energy, which I didn't have before. And it was just that little post by Joe, and it's something that got me out there. And, I don't know, jiu-jitsu is awesome. I'm learning, it teaches me, it just makes me a better person. And I know I just now rambled and went way off topic, but it made me think about that too.
I'm glad I could help. Gary, you pay me to have compliments every now and then. It makes me feel like king of the hill. So, but anyway, we all need that support sometimes, and you never know where it's going to come from. I love that video, by the way. I shared it on Facebook of Jake's wife doing the kettlebells. Yeah. And that 9 or 12-year-old girl behind her copying her, doing them along with her. I mean, you just never know as a grown-up or older teen when you're training. You just never know who you might be inspiring, and I thought that was awesome.
Yep, that was a good one to share, Joe. He is the most interesting grappler in the world.
Working with a group of scientists, I attempted to train a group of leeches to drain cauliflower ear. This project ultimately failed because all things I trained end up giving cauliflower ear, not taking it away. As a teenager, I got fired from my pizza delivery job because I kept offering free pizzas if you could tap me out. Nobody ever tapped me out, but I I got many complaints about not following IBJJF rules. I had to get congressional approval before entering a tournament. I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BjjBrick Podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
All right, my friends, I'm happy to bring Jared Dopp back to the BjjBrick Podcast. Jared, it's been a couple of years. We had you on the show, let's see, I guess a few years, April of 2015. Jared, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Byron, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I learned a lot from you last time, and I guess I didn't realize how much time had passed since we've had you on last. So really happy to get you back on the show. If somebody hasn't heard of you, or maybe they hadn't heard the last podcast or been following you on social media, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and a little bit about your grappling too.
Yeah, so I am a PhD student in chemical engineering at Iowa State University. Throughout much of my college career, I've been involved in sports and mostly Brazilian jiu-jitsu, obviously. I've been, I don't know what to say, I've been lucky enough, but I've had the opportunity to compete at very high levels. Won some world championships before I was a black belt, and then was able to get second at Nogi Worlds a couple of years ago, and I've been to 3 ADCCs. I got fourth at 2 of them, got second at another. Again, almost all while doing school. And right now I'm just trying to find the best way to balance the, my career pursuits and my kind of jiu-jitsu hobby. Find the best way to meld them together.
How long have you been training?
Oh, so that's a great question. It's not an easy answer. So,
well, I asked because the first ADCC you went to, I correct me if I'm wrong, you were a purple belt, is that correct?
Yeah, that was in 2013.
Okay, that's amazing right there. So, yeah, how long have you been training?
Okay, well, I started jiu-jitsu. Well, let's say I took my first class, let's say, I want to say it was in like 2015, right? So, 2005, 10-year difference there. So I was in high school, and I only was ever able to do jiu-jitsu over the summer, and I did it once or twice a week. So if you think about there only being like 2 or 3 months in the summer, and you go once or twice a week for 1 or 2 hours, it takes a long time for that to add up. So I did that a little bit, and then I was just involved in sports during high school, and those always took precedence over jiu-jitsu, because I was trying to get into college. I wanted to play college football, all of that. So I guess you could say, I really started back in 2005. So I had an idea of what jiu-jitsu was a long time ago. But I took, definitely like a 2-year break where I didn't do any martial arts whatsoever. And eventually came back in 2011, kind of doing the same thing, twice a week, 2 or 3 times a week, just because that's what we offered. So definitely I've been familiar with it for like 13 years, but I would say in the beginning there, it's kind of hard to count that towards the total. Since if you looked at the hours that I've put in versus the hours other people put in, it would almost be embarrassing for me. I'd be like, oh, hey, I've got like half or a third of the hours that everybody else puts in.
And that's because the start of it, for if you look at the year, you started in summers and not even every day. So you weren't like super, you just, as a high school student, you found it and it was probably something that you liked and you did it when you could. Is that accurate?
Yeah, pretty much. And that first summer, maybe a little bit of the second summer, we really didn't even do any gi. It was just a t-shirt and shorts. And it was originally taught to help our local law enforcement better defend themselves and better apprehend people without actually hurting them. And it's odd. We had like all of the cops that were coming to it were all like 185 and above. And so my cousin works in the Bureau of Indian Affairs. He was the one teaching it. He was like, hey, we have all these big guys if you want to jump in and help out, like, we need the bodies. We'll do it for free, just and you'll learn something. So that's kind of what got me into it.
That's cool. And that being in like a high school time and nogi and working with those officers, what was the training room like compared to just like a typical nogi class? Were they doing like how to handcuff people, or how to retain their guns, or was it basically you were rolling with them?
No, it was basically just rolling.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty simple. Everybody was pretty relaxed. Nobody wanted to get injured. Nobody was crazy. It was actually a good experience.
You mentioned that you wanted to play football in college. Did you do that?
I did. I wound up going to a junior college first, and kind of screwed that up. I wound up quitting, and then took a year and a half off, and then walked on at a Division II down in Texas. Did that for about 2 years, but in hindsight, if I wouldn't have quit that first time, I wouldn't have had to walk on somewhere and have to deal with what a walk on has to deal with. Typically, if you go to a junior college and you get any semblance of playtime whatsoever, you'll get to go somewhere and be kind of treated pretty nice and get a scholarship. Eventually, because of all that, I wound up actually like paying to play football, which is kind of a bummer, but I still got to experience it.
Yeah. Was that your main sport before you started taking jiu-jitsu more seriously, or did you wrestle? Or
that was my main sport. I didn't specialize necessarily. I tried a lot of sports growing up, and I definitely found sports that I was not good at. So basketball and baseball, I absolutely cannot do. I mean, I might be able to now, but when I was trying them out, I was extremely uncoordinated. And those two sports require a lot of hand-eye coordination. And things like football, you have to have a little bit of coordination, but it's really all about hitting somebody, moving somebody, running away or towards somebody, So I really focused on football. I'd been playing that. I played that for 13 years overall, but another sport that was not too tough for me was just track and field. That doesn't require too much coordination unless you're a thrower. And then in high school, I got to do powerlifting. So I eventually narrowed it down to those three.
Do you think that having the variety of those was a big benefit, or did one of them really help you more than the others in using athleticism on the mats?
I honestly think all three were a big part of it, right? So football was definitely the main one. That's the one that if I knew I was going to go and play at the collegiate level, it had to be that one. But track and powerlifting were both very supplemental to that. I mean, as a football player, you always want to be faster. You always want to be stronger. And it was kind of like, okay, well, why not do both of them? Not to mention the fact that the football coach was the track coach and the powerlifting coach. So I really didn't have much of an option. Do you know what I mean? But that was the thing. And we also had it was a really small school. So if you found someone who was an athlete in that school, chances are they played at least 3 sports.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, I absolutely think that like all 3 absolutely played a role. Obviously football had the bigger influence because I did it for so much longer, but all 3, because, football is a team sport, right? And you have your job that you have to do, but you're just one of 11, and if anything in that machine, I'll refer to it as me, if anything in that machine breaks down, it can cause basically a play to go wrong. But in track and powerlifting, I don't want to say they're similar to something like wrestling, but they're one-on-one basically, unless you're doing a relay, and even then that you're still kind of one-on-one. So that's I was always way more nervous in track and powerlifting than I ever was in football, just because I knew I was like, okay, if I mess up, if I lose, it's because of me. It's because I'm not fast enough, because I'm not strong enough to lift the weight or something like that. And so I think those are very good for dealing with the individual pressure and the nerves that come from an individual sport. And then football is good for just, a whole different set of things.
Are the nerves still there? I mean, so it's the stages are bigger now, but I'd imagine like maybe you handle the nerves differently or something like that. Who was more nervous, the young Jared Dopp doing a track and field thing or something like that, or the current Jared Dopp on a big stage grappling a very tough opponent? Like before the match, if you had to, like, I don't know, a scale of 1 to 10 of who's nervous, do you still feel those same nerves, or do you handle them differently?
I think I handle them differently now, just because I've had the experience that I've had. There are very few times in my life that I have been as nervous as I was before running a 400-meter dash, and I do not know why.
Huh.
I think it was always because I always knew that I could do pretty well, but then as soon as I got kind of at the top, I would lose. I just wasn't fast enough in the 400 to do it, but that would bug me a little bit, and I would start to feel weird in the stomach, and I'd just be like, "Gosh, can we just get this over with? Can we just get this over with?" But in jiu-jitsu, I've obviously lived through all that, and I've competed at the top, and I know that, or at least in nogi, anyways, and I know that I can compete there. I know that I do belong there, and so that makes it easier for me to get over the nerves.
So it seems like to me, and I'm definitely not a track athlete, but the 400 is a particularly painful event. Like, it's just all out. It's too far to go all out. It feels like to me anyway. Did that affect your nervousness, or was it just the ability to? Sorry, my voice messed up. Or was it just the ability to not perform where you had wanted to perform?
It was just that nervousness of like, oh my gosh, am I? Yeah, being afraid that I'm not going to perform the way I want to, because it's not like I hadn't ran it a million times. By no means was I like an amazing 400 athlete, and I knew that, especially when I saw at state just how some people were running low 50s, high 40s, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to win this, but I'm gonna go out there. I'm gonna try. Just like, don't look stupid. Don't get smoked. So, yeah, that makes it pretty rough. But it is. So that's what makes the 400 terrible, is that it actually is an all-out sprint, and you have to train yourself to be able to do it 100% the whole time. But you also have to pace yourself in certain parts of the track. So, like, you start off going around the curve and you're sprinting really hard, your strides are shorter, and then on that back straight 100 you actually have to try to maintain your speed, but you stride out more, and then on the curve coming back again, shorten your stride, really quick steps, and then the last 100 is just who's mentally tougher. Honestly, like if two guys are coming off of that back curve and they're tied in that last 100, it comes down to who really wants it more.
And we see that sometimes, like towards the end of a match, it seems like you're able to push a little bit better than most of the competitors out there.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where it's from.
Okay. Like comparing the athleticism you found or you earned in your younger days, how did that, like when you showed up onto the more elite jiu-jitsu scene, did a lot of those athletes have similar athleticism, or did you feel like that was a category that you had in your favor?
I felt like that's something that I've had in my favor, and I still kind of feel that way a little bit, just because I had that background. I started doing sports when I was 7 years old. I'm 29 now, and I never really stopped. And the sports that I did always required a lot of lateral movement, not just going forward and backwards. And that translates really well to how you have to move in jiu-jitsu, especially if you're working takedowns or working passing. It's a little different if you're playing guard. But I think a lot of people didn't have that background. They haven't done all the lateral movement drills that I've done. They haven't been in the weight room as much as I have. And for me, all I really have to do is kind of try to maintain that, since I built up that base when I was younger. And a lot of the guys who I face and some of that I face now have to kind of start from zero if they didn't have a similar background. Now, there are some people that I've competed against that definitely have some raw athletic gifts, but I don't think they've had the same amount of time to refine those as I have.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And you also have like world-class training as well on the mats. So that's a great combination.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I got lucky and was able to experience training in Oklahoma City with Rafael Lovato Jr. And that, I mean, yeah, the athleticism plus that definitely a good background.
So you mentioned you're now a PhD student. You're not in Oklahoma anymore. So how do you do that? How are you going and accomplishing one of the most difficult things a student can do, and managing to stay on the mats and compete?
Man, that's the question of the day. So it's really tough. It really is. But one of the things that I learned, so I told you that I had quit playing football when I was a freshman in college 11 years ago. And what I found out is if I'm not active in a sport, my grades will slip. And that basically from that, I've learned that I have to continue to be active, not just going to the gym and lifting weights for no reason. I have to have some type of competition. I need to feel like I'm a student athlete still, I think. And for me, it's kind of like when you know that about yourself, you don't have a choice. You have to find a way to balance, or you're going to, obviously your attention span is going to slip, your grades are going to slip, and it's going to be, it would negatively affect my education. So I've been trying to figure out, what the best way to do it. And I still struggle with that. I'm in my third year of graduate study, and it's still tough to do. Don't get me wrong. But I now, in case you don't know, I'm no longer part of the Lovato or Ribeiro. I'm part of Alliance.
Okay.
And we have a small Alliance affiliate here. Vladimir Williams, he learned under Jacare back in Atlanta. And he relocated to Ames, Iowa for work. And he's been in jiu-jitsu for a long time. He wrestled growing up. He did judo. He hasn't competed in a while. But that's just because of, age and injuries. And so, we don't have a ton of people here to train with, but they typically come and they're down to train. We got a lot of white belts, some few blue belts, a couple purple, one brown, and everybody, kind of has their own life. And so they have problems getting in there also. But with the training being in the same town, it only takes me, 10 or 15 minutes to get there, which is not bad. I know some people, and I used to have to as well, drive, 30 to 45 minutes to go train. But the big thing about graduate school, so part of what makes it hard is that you do have to take some pretty tough classes, but that's in the beginning. And that was really hard for me. I actually didn't take those classes very seriously and didn't get as much out of them as I should. But you also have to do research as if you are, I don't want to say it's like a 9 to 5, because you make your own hours based on what you think is going to help you be most successful. Okay. But it basically is a job. If you're in graduate school in STEM, then you'll take your classes that are required for your discipline, and you will do research trying to further knowledge on some project. Typically try to do something that no one else has ever done. It's a little easier to get a master's, but then for your PhD, that is absolutely, you have to do something original, something novel, and it can take a lot of time. I definitely have days where I'm in the lab for, let's say, 10 hours. It's not uncommon for a lot of other students to put in like a 60-hour week, and I'm 100% against that. partially because I think that sucks, and then I wouldn't be able to make it to the gym. I wouldn't be able to make it to jiu-jitsu. But also there's a really high incidence of depression and suicide among graduate students. And I think it's because they really feel the pressure from their advisor basically being their boss, to be productive, to put out papers, and to come up with results all the time, just because of the nature of graduate school and funding and science in general. And they don't really plan out these other things they need to do. Maybe they've never done it before. Maybe they don't really know that they need to plan out, going to the gym or whatever. But I think what has helped me with it is when I came in, I said, no, I'm going to continue to do this. And if I can't be competitive anymore, that's okay. I'm still going to make the time to go compete. So the way I balance it is just that I know it's like, all right, if I need to go to jiu-jitsu at least twice a week, but I'm going to try to make it more. And I also need to sneak away to the gym during the day, at least a few times a week. And if my productivity suffers a little bit, then I'll just have to, take a scolding from my advisor and just kind of go on with it,
Yeah, it sounds like a similar situation for me. When I can go to jiu-jitsu, I do that, but there's really not an excuse that I could make that I couldn't work out in a certain day, because like the gym, or a lot of times I'll just go run with my dog. Like that, I could do that anytime. I can get up earlier, I can stay up a little later, but jiu-jitsu is at certain times, and if they don't match up with my schedule, it's hard to make those happen. But there's always room for some kind of fitness. You just, if it doesn't need to have a class with a bunch of other skilled athletes in there, like going to the gym and lifting weights, it's a little easier to just make that happen, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's where a lot of people get mistaken. And when I was in Oklahoma City, some people were like, well, why don't you just go to the gym less often? And I said, well, jiu-jitsu is only taught at these times. And so I can plan my day out so that I'm free at those times. But if I'm free for an hour, let's say at noon, well, I don't have jiu-jitsu classes at noon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, okay, what else could I be doing right now? Well, I could be going to the gym and correcting all the functional issues that you get by doing jiu-jitsu all the time, or getting stronger or running or whatever. And so that's how I do it. I actually have a Google Calendar, and I have in there, and it's, it's not like it changes. It's the same all the time. I have in there when the evening jiu-jitsu classes are, because those are the ones that I'm going to go to. I prefer to work during the day and jiu-jitsu at the evening. And I always try to make sure I always look at that. And if I'm scheduling anything, I try to make sure that those are always open. And, every now and then I do have to work late and I can't quite make it. But, everything else is just kind of falling in between.
Yeah.
If I have extra time, I run off to the gym to work out.
So when you're at work, you're in the lab. What, if you could dumb it down? What are you working on? What are you studying? What are you learning?
Okay. Let me disclaimer. What I do for research right now is absolutely not what I came to graduate school to do. So if I have a hard time making it sound exciting, that's why.
Okay.
So when I'm in the lab, I'm in chemical engineering, and the interesting thing about chemical engineering is that we're very, we can do a lot of things just by the nature of our education, right? And so a typical chemical engineer, you can think of them as taking something that's not worth a lot, doing something to it and making it worth a lot, basically. And that usually comes in the form of, if you have a chemist or someone who's working on a bench top, basically doing these really small scale experiments, they come up with something really cool, this process to make some valuable product. The chemical engineer is the person who has some level of understanding of that, But what they typically do is they take those small scale processes and they figure out the best way to do large scale, so that you can make a profit off of it. And they, as chemical engineers, have to have some idea of materials for construction, pilot plants, economics, all kinds of stuff like that, right? And for research, what we typically do is we go back down to the small scale, but we always try to keep scaling up in mind. So that's there's always that thought in what we're doing. But for me in particular, I actually work with I work with microorganisms, specifically E. coli.
Okay.
Not the kind that wants to kill you. So I work with E. coli that's non-pathogenic. So that means it's not going to try to infect you. It's not going to try to kill you. E. coli is basically used a lot in laboratory setting because they're they're basically like a workhorse. You can make a lot of them really fast, and you can manipulate them so that they'll make something that you want. They'll make something valuable. So so for me, I have my low value stuff, which is my E. coli, and I have them make my high value product. So for me, though, I work on something called cell-free protein synthesis. So that's my current work. So I grow up a whole bunch of E. coli, enough that you can actually see this massive clump of them, and I bust them open. Right, so they're not living anymore. Bust them open, and I basically harvest their guts or their cytoplasm. Right, I don't want their cell membranes. Right, every cell has a cell membrane, and I don't want that. That kind of gets in the way of what I'm doing. And their guts will still work after they're dead.
Wow.
Yeah, which totally weird, but you have to think about it in terms of like. It's very simple. They're very simple components. As long as the stuff that they need is there, they'll still continue to do what they were doing before. Now it only lasts for so long, but it's a really simple way of making what you want. So we're interested in making proteins, and proteins are everywhere. They're responsible for structures. Functions. They're responsible for a lot of diseases. Human skin is made up of a bunch of different proteins. Cartilages. There's even some protein in bone and teeth. And the better that you understand how these work, kind of the better you can. In my opinion, the better you can do human health. Now, other people want to use proteins for different reasons, right? They want to use enzymes to catalyze reactions and stuff like that. But what we are trying to find is what kind of proteins would we like to test out on a small scale. So we're not going to do like the big manufacturing to make money. We're more focused on, okay, we have this, these cell guts that we'll call cell extract, and they will make a protein if we give them the right genetic information. So basically, DNA tells the extract what protein to make. So I get online, I look up what protein I want to make, and then I order a piece of DNA that codes for that protein. You can get online and just order and be like, okay, I want this piece of DNA that codes for this protein, and then you just add it to the reaction. I mean, it's that's oversimplified, but it's basically
it's basically like an Amazon, but that sells DNA.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
So yeah, you would never think. I never knew. There's one just like 2 hours down the road. And so, it's pretty modular, right? It's like as long as I can make this cell extract, I can use it to make kind of whatever protein I want with some limitations.
So it's kind of like the E. coli is like a vehicle to help get you where you want to go, or doing something that you want to do. And you just plug different things into that system.
Yeah, basically, it's just a tool, and you can tweak certain things about the tool to get the output that you want. And typically people keep live E. coli, and what they do is you can also put DNA in live E. coli, and they'll make the protein that's on that DNA while they're alive, and they'll make a ton of it. And so that's what you would do if you wanted to actually manufacture a bunch of protein. But it takes a long time to do that. So for mine, it's a little more small scale, right? So if you're like, okay, well, we have this protein, but we want to see if we can improve this protein's function, or we just want to change a few amino acids in this protein and see what happens. That's kind of what mine's better for, because everything happens really fast. You don't make a lot of it. You make enough to test. But it's a lot quicker.
Okay. You said that this really wasn't the idea of why you went to grad school. What was or what do you want to do as an end result?
So I originally got into grad school because I saw the biomedical engineering field.
Okay.
So at the University of Oklahoma, we didn't have a BME department at the time. They just got one, about a year or so ago. It was just the chemical engineering department, and we would teach an intro to biomedical class as a graduate elective, and they would teach tissue engineering as a graduate elective. Now, undergrads had to take at least one graduate elective. And I took the biomedical one, and I was like, man, this stuff is really cool. Because at the time I wasn't like really big into biology, but that was real more like application based. Like, this is what biomedical engineers do, and a lot of chemical engineers actually do this. And it was just that class was very kind of like broad spectrum. It just showed all the different things you can do. But the one that I really liked was tissue engineering, and so I took a class in that. They happened to offer it while I was there, and that's basically trying to regenerate damaged or lost tissue through engineering means. People would typically think that a biologist or someone with an MD would be into this, but the thing is like those people never take the engineering side of classes. And so anything that involves like really hardcore math, like if they've never taken that hardcore math, they can't really, they wouldn't even know that it's necessary, right? And it turns out that, let's say cartilage, for example. We'll just use cartilage as an example, right? So cartilage is made up of some different things. One of the primary components is collagen, and it's arranged there's different types of collagen, which I didn't know until just a few years ago. It's tightly packed, it's really fibrous, but there are cells in the collagen, and they make the collagen, but they also kind of need the collagen to survive. So it's kind of a cycle there. Well, anytime that you damage your collagen in your joints, you actually kill some of those cells. And those cells don't like to regenerate. And if you kill a few of them, they're pretty sensitive, so almost all of them will die. And then you'll start to wear away your collagen, you'll start to wear away, what was I saying there? I just lost it. Cartilage.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll start. Yeah, sorry, I totally lost there. You start to wear away your cartilage, right? And the tissue engineer sits back and says, okay, well, let's look at sort of the physical properties of cartilage, which maybe people didn't think about before. Like, how much can you stretch it before it tears? How much can you compress it before it bursts? Things like that. And then, so that's a very like material science type thing to understand the material properties of that. And they also started to say, well, you can't just take these cells. They're called chondrocytes. So chondrocytes are the cells that grow in cartilage. They said, well, we can't just take chondrocytes and inject them, like let's say into your knee, and have them produce cartilage, which would have been the original biological solution to the problem, right? But then you take an engineering approach to the problem and you say, well, these chondrocytes probably like to grow on collagen or something with the same material properties as collagen. And so that's where the engineering here kind of takes off. You're now trying to manufacture a material that replicates collagen so that these cells will grow on them and that they'll be happy, and then they'll actually make collagen. Sorry, cartilage.
Huh. Yeah.
they'll make cartilage, right? And then you can go ahead and put that into the knee. And sometimes instead they'll find these they'll make things called hydrogels, and you can put cells in these hydrogels and inject it in, and that gel will stiffen and start to mimic cartilage, and the cells will like it, and they'll start to reproduce and again make cartilage. And so that's it's a little more on the materials science side, but you also have to think about things that a chemical engineer would typically think about. So you have to think that these cells, they want a certain amount of oxygen, they want a certain amount of blood flow. Then you have to remove any metabolic byproducts, so any waste. And that's very much an engineering problem.
Man. That's a lot of things to in a system to kind of tweak and to find like a happy place for that stuff to grow, the cartilage to develop. I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than you just explained, but you made it simple enough to where I can understand that it's very complicated.
Well, it's complicated, but there's a lot of knobs to twist. But it's really interesting, especially for me being an athlete. Like, we all get injuries, but I'm sure I'm sure you have maybe some like aching pains from jiu-jitsu.
Oh, sure.
And that's kind of what got me into it. It's like, well, what if we could fix these kind of like aching pains without having to go through hardcore surgery?
That'd be great. And I'm sure everybody listening is hoping you find some big breakthrough and benefit from that yourself, and everybody would benefit as well. So that's you're explaining all this stuff and this complicated biology stuff, and something that just popped in my head. I got to know: do you wash your belt in between training sessions?
Oh man, usually I don't.
Okay.
Which is kind of weird with me working with microorganisms and stuff all the time. The times that my belt has been washed has like been an accident, or if I have washed it once or twice where I've had it and it just smelled so bad.
So when it smells bad, what are we smelling there?
Well, a little bit of that is actually from your sweat, right? So your sweat gets in and it soaks in, and then the water dries out, and it leaves. It can leave some pretty nasty stuff, basically, and so you'll smell that stuff sometimes, and other times it might be some bacteria or something like that. The thing is like bacteria typically they need something to eat, and there's really not a whole lot to eat in your belt. But there's definitely some other. Yeah, you're mostly going to be smelling the stuff that comes out of your own skin.
Okay, I always just thought that you're kind of sopping up a lot of stuff on the mat as well, just because it's touching the mat more than it's touching me. And I've been washing my belt for years, and it's just part of the habit. I get home after my gi and the belt and all that stuff, and into the machine and hit go. And anything on that mat will also get soaked up by the belt. So. That's absolutely true. Jared, to be honest, I'm a little surprised that you don't have it as a habit of washing your belt, knowing as much as you do know, and it's a little surprising.
Well, I did karate for so long when I was younger, just for fun.
Yeah,
and that was one of the big things. Like, it doesn't matter what martial art it is; they're always like, okay, you don't wash your belt. And I think that's cool. I think it's a cool tradition, and I've always grappled with that, like, especially after getting into this. I'm like, gosh, do I wash this thing? Do I not wash this thing? But am I going to get some crazy infection from it someday? Like, it's an internal struggle that I deal with. That,
yeah.
Actually.
Well, you could get something. You could give something to somebody else. There are lots of infections out there that people get while training jiu-jitsu, and if we could eliminate like 10% of them by washing the outside of our uniforms, I think that's a good thing. Like in karate, I don't think karate is maybe not as important because they're typically standing, and maybe you drip a little bit onto your own belt. But in jiu-jitsu, we have people walking on the mats. Their feet may be less clean than you would hope. I know you work very hard on the mats as well. So there are times when there's just just liquid on the mat. So I don't know. I'm not trying to debate you here or anything like that, but I wash my belt. I haven't noticed any difference in my performance, and nobody seems to mind it. And I would feel like I hate to have somebody get like a staph infection and be like, well, how clean is my uniform? Like, and thinking about that, and if it contributed at all to something like that.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. I absolutely agree with that. It's it's just one of those traditions where I have to sit around and think about it. But I do try to do a happy medium. I will spray my belt with Lysol, like soak it with Lysol. But that's not going to get everything.
Yeah. So I've heard this like during the I don't know. I'm interested in a lot of different things. So going off on this kind of a sciencey tangent, I think is kind of fun. But like in the cold and flu season, you wash your hands, and you're not killing anything. You're just washing it away. And so is that when we wash our belts, we actually remove the stuff from the belt and wash it away. It doesn't really kill a lot, and the Lysol actually kills things. Is that at all right, or am I just remembering that wrong?
Okay, well, it can. Okay. So when you wash with soap can absolutely kill stuff.
Okay.
And that's because soap is okay. Without getting too crazy about it, it's like if you have a bacteria, right? A bacteria is just going to have this cell membrane that's basically made of fat. So it's made of lipids or made of fat. Well, soap is able to dissolve fats.
Okay, so it just busts the membranes up. So it can.
Yeah, it absolutely can. So it's because we refer to soap kind of like in science, like it's a detergent, and part of the soap is one part of the soap is more like fat, and one part of the soap is more like water, right? Because those two don't really mix. So you have basically any soap molecule has a fatty part and a more of like a water part that mixes with water a little better. And so it can absolutely start to dissolve those cell membranes and stuff like that. And then even with viruses are basically one big protein. And strong detergents and soaps and stuff can actually mess with those proteins as well. So it does remove it from the hands, but it can also kill them, especially if you have like an antibacterial soap that has a little something extra added in there to kill them.
But that's kind of what Lysol is. It's the antibacterial elements. It just kills them right there.
Yeah, Lysol basically doesn't have any. I don't think it has any soap or strong detergents. It might have a little bit, but anything with a detergent will suds up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if you have just a little bit of it, like a very little bit of it, it'll still make suds. And I don't think Lysol has that. But I mean, there's a lot of other things out there. So like if you wash your hands with ethanol or like vodka or something, that's going to pretty much kill any microorganism. It might dry your skin out also, but it'll pretty much kill anything on there.
Huh. There we go. I didn't know for sure what we'd be talking about today, but you get somebody that knows as much about biology and that sort of thing, and it's good to use you as that resource as well. I mean, you have a lot of knowledge about jiu-jitsu and training methods and that sort of thing, but you bring some things that most people don't really understand, and it's great that you share that with us.
Man, I surprisingly, maybe it's not surprising. I guess you have to kind of be a bit of a nerd to stay in school this long. I love to geek out on stuff like that.
Well, that's good. What do you see as your future? Like maybe like within a year, and then even longer with competitive jiu-jitsu.
I really hope to just keep going about it the same way that I always have. I would like to compete more often, definitely. And so that's my goal. My goal is to try to find more time to travel and compete. Obviously, my goal is to also try to continue to keep a balance with training and school. And I think I'm always fighting that battle of trying to trying to make that happen, trying to make it work as best as it can, because it's obviously, like, as you know, I mean, it's variable. It changes week to week what you're able to do. I think the biggest thing that will come up with that is I'm actually, I told you that this is the research that I do, and then I told you the research that I want to do. And I've pretty much kind of found out that if I stay at Iowa State, I won't be able to do that research. So I've been applying to some other graduate programs in biomedical engineering. I originally wanted to be a chemie that does biomedical, but if I go to a biomedical program, I'll definitely be able to do something like that. And so if I decide to accept, if I get into another school and I decide to accept and move, then I'm going to have to move somewhere else and get into my groove with another graduate program, get into the groove with some other place to train. And, as you know, if you're going to move somewhere, you kind of got to start all over and start from the, build that up again, build up whatever system I've got going here. It's not the best, but it works. And now I would have to find that somewhere else also. And so that's something that could happen basically within the next year. And that would probably be the biggest thing.
I guess, are you always going to consider yourself kind of a student? I mean, is that just the nature of the business that you're going to be in? You're always going to be having to learn and develop things. Maybe not like in a school setting, but the idea that you feel that you learn better and you perform better off the mats when you're consider yourself an athlete. Do you think that will stay with you for a long time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I certainly hope so. Jiu-jitsu is the sport that we all think of as something that we can do while we're aging, and you can continue to do it while you're pretty old. I don't know, when I would have to actually stop competing. I hope I can continue to be healthy enough to compete for many, many years. But I'm definitely a student. I definitely love to learn, and I think that once the learning stops, things are no longer fun. Once you feel like you're not learning anymore, you kind of stagnate. Things become less fun. And so I think that's also, it's one thing with jiu-jitsu, and people talk about how the journey really starts at black belt. Well, I kind of rushed up to black belt, and there's a lot of stuff I didn't learn. There's a lot of stuff I didn't know. And that's really what I've been trying to fix as a black belt. So while other people are out here really trying to strategize and focus on their games, I'm still trying to figure out, okay, well, what is my game? How should I best implement it? And then what about this other thing that seems pretty cool that I should have learned a few years ago, but I didn't? And it's just being, for me, being black belt is being very exploratory. It's being very curious. Like, obviously, I still have to have my A game nailed down pretty good before I go to compete, but I like exploring these other things too. And I think I kind of have that personality in school as well. Like, I'm in school. I've been in school for so long because, I majored in this, and then I decided, like, crap, that's not really what I wanted to do. Let me try this out. And then I liked it, but then it took me somewhere where I didn't want to be. And I was like, okay, I have this one thing that I really want to do. I've got to be able to do this before I call it quits on school. And so now I'm kind of in that too. So like each time I took I got to learn something different and try to figure out where it is that I actually want to be, what it is that I actually want to do. And I think that's very similar to what I'm going through with the black belt. I originally thought that, like, oh man, this was going to be my game. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be great at this. And then I was like, whoa, crap. Maybe I don't like that as much as I like this. Let me try this over here and let me try this over here. And so, I think I'm always going to be a student of the game, even though I'm guilty of not watching film very often or at all. But I think that love of learning is absolutely what keeps me in it.
I like what you're saying, and I think that we could all take this and apply it to our own jiu-jitsu. We get these A games, which your A game is an actual A game. It's like elite level competitor, but we all have what we consider to be the best parts of our game, and we we tend to play those a lot, and that's probably why, in a big element, why they are our A game. But you still need to have that part that is open to new things, that is experimenting out there, and it will take you in different ways sometimes. And a lot of times those are dead ends. Like maybe I'll work on a certain sweep for a week or two, and it never goes anywhere. But if I do that, and I try things a lot and experiment, and then I keep my A game, developed and polished, I guess, occasionally you'll find something that's great and that fits into that, and it really takes off for you. And I think that that's something that is easy to forget. It's easy to just go in there and play your A game all the time and to do your best, and forget that we're training to learn, not just to do better while training.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely agree. And what I've found a lot is I've looked at some of my losses, and I saw that, okay, I was definitely doing my A game, but if I would have just been a little more open to trying something else, that could have went differently. It's kind of like you eventually have to take the risk, because your A game has to evolve, because other people are going to watch film on you, or they're going to know about you, and they're going to have a counter ready for you. And if you just go out there and do the same thing every time, people are going to catch on. And then it becomes the fact that, like, well, your A game just has to be so good that no one can stop it. And that's really hard. And so I think you always have to look at your A game and say, okay, well, what if I decided to add this? What if I decided to spice things up a little bit and try this out? And so absolutely. I definitely train and try other things. That's part of the reason I'd actually like to compete more, is so I can go and add these new things without feeling as much pressure, right? So it's like I haven't competed nogi all year, but I'm going to Nogi Worlds this week, and it's like, oh, do you just go with the A game that everybody knows that you have, or do you open it up a little bit, take the risk, and give people something they haven't seen?
Yeah, and that's part of the fun as spectators as well. Jared, what advice do you have for somebody who's in school full time? Really, that's a big focus for them, and they're also wanting to get better at jiu-jitsu and to get the most of that journey. What do you have for them for advice?
So my first piece of advice, like the first step that I think anybody should take, is using whichever online calendar they want to use, whether it's Apple or Google Calendar. I use Google Calendar just because it syncs with everything that I have, and put in there what class times for jiu-jitsu that are relevant to you, right? So I mean, if there's a 10 a.m. jiu-jitsu class, but you have a 10 a.m. class at school, I probably wouldn't put that one down, because it's really unlikely that you're going to get to go to that one unless class gets canceled. And you know how you can tell it to repeat this for however long, or repeat until infinity or whatever. Just have the ones that you think would be your best options on there repeating, so that every day you have that reminder, at this time I can go to jiu-jitsu, right? And then my other, the next thing would be, if you can't make every one of them, if you've blocked off 5 a week, don't think that you have to go 5 times a week. Every now and then you're going to have homework, or maybe you have to go to school and get a job, or maybe, who knows, maybe you get a date or something, right? So don't try to hold yourself to it super strict, right? Just know that if you miss 1 or 2, you have 3 or 4 other options that you can go to. And at the same time, during your day, if something does happen and you do have some free time, if you have 2 hours of free time, I would say that's a pretty good chunk, and if it's not at the same time as a jiu-jitsu class, don't waste those 2 hours. I'm not going to say that sitting and watching Netflix is a waste, because there's research out there that shows that we actually have to, I don't want to say unplug, because if you're watching Netflix, you're not really unplugged. But there's definitely, you have to pull yourself away from everything, and you have to turn your brain off.
Unwind,
out. Yeah, absolutely. So if you feel like if you have a lot of stress and you need to do that, then yeah, absolutely. But if you've got a 2-hour block in a day, that's perfect to go in and get like an hour strength and conditioning session or yoga or whatever it is you do to supplement your jiu-jitsu, right? So always be flexible with that. Always be flexible with your free time if you have such a thing. And for me, I don't always take advantage of my weekend as well as I could. But I think that's something that people should definitely do, right? And so if you have training on Saturday and then you have Sunday off, you might think of going in and going to the gym on Sunday again for, a short strength and conditioning session. Or if you either did, if you lifted or trained every other day that week, then don't go in on Sunday, right? So part of my advice is be smart about what you're doing to your body, especially if you're in school. Some people in school are super stressed out. They're very type A, and I'm not at all. So that makes things a little easier for me. But the biggest thing is that you miss a lot of sleep. And if you feel terrible, like if you just absolutely feel horrible, take the day off. Be willing to take a day off. A lot of people don't want to. So I would say my biggest things is put the training times on something like a Google Calendar.
Okay.
Be flexible with your free time. Take advantage of it, and don't be afraid to take a day off and take a rest. And I think those are the three biggest things to me.
Okay, and you're definitely an authority on those topics. Really amazing what you're doing, and we don't see. I don't know anybody else who's in the jiu-jitsu world that's doing what you're doing, as busy as you are, studying and doing things like that, and competing at that level, and juggling that. So you're a great example to learn from.
Oh, well, thanks, man. I occasionally I think there's some people who they're just kind of struggling with it, or they're not black belts yet or something.
Yeah. There's probably a lot of people that we don't hear about, but
yeah.
I
mean, I get messages every now and then from people, and honestly, they're like, "Oh man, I look up to you, like you inspire me, like I do this, this, and this," and I'm like, "Man, that what you just told me is inspiring to me." I've definitely heard some pretty good stories. They're just not big name competitors,
Yeah, and that's most people aren't big name competitors, but we have to live our lives the best that we can and be happy with what we're doing. And if you want to do well in competition and you want to do well in school, which if you're in school you should be trying to do well because it's a big deal. It's expensive and it's time consuming and that sort of thing. So great advice, Jared.
Oh yeah, no problem. Any time.
You do have a sponsor too you want to mention?
Yes, absolutely. So my sponsor is Hyperfly, and I've been with them for a long time. Great people, great product. If you go to hyperflybrand.com, you can browse all. This is the stuff that I always wear when I'm competing, and if you use the code MEGALOWDOP, you get 10% off. That's
nice. And
I have to offer you guys something for getting on there.
That's cool. And you were back on here several years ago, and Hyperfly was your sponsor then, and I think that's really cool. You see a lot of times people change sponsors, or sponsors will drop an athlete or something like that, but that's cool that you've had that relationship with them.
Oh yeah, like I said, they're great people. They're all about keeping the sponsors, the sponsored athletes taken care of. And I honestly don't know why other people jump sponsor so much. I've got a great relationship with these people. I think the product's amazing, and I don't ever see myself going anywhere else.
I forgot to ask you. I was going to ask you before I let you go. Are you training more gi or no gi, or what's your current status with that?
I wind up training more gi, and oddly enough, everybody thinks I'm a no gi guy. I think I'm just better at no gi for whatever reason, but I have always trained more in a gi than no gi. I mean, I do step up the no gi training a bit, before Nogi Worlds or before ADCC, obviously. But I always just somehow find myself at the gi classes more often.
That's cool. And you seem to do things that translate, from one to the other very well. So that's, I think that's something a lot of us could try to relate to.
Yeah, it's tough because when you really get down and think about it, they're almost different sports.
Yeah. You see, you see these. I think of it kind of like Olympic swimming, and you see like some of these athletes winning multiple medals in multiple different swimming strokes. Those are actually different things. Like, yeah, it's all swimming, and they have that base set of lungs and these really good muscles and all that stuff. But the actual techniques they're doing are different. And same thing with like, okay, if you're Jared Dopp, you've got your strength and physical abilities, that you have, and you're plugging them into different things, and they are quite a bit different when it comes down to it. But it's just common in our community still that people want to excel at both, and it's impressive to see people do that.
Well, and I'll tell you this: I wish I was successful in the gi as I was no gi, but it really is tough, right? Especially if you train gi all the time, you're super comfortable grabbing the gi, and then you go into no gi, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have anything to hold on to. I can't slow this guy down. I try to keep those principles the same. I focus a lot on like wrist control, neck control, grabbing the ankles and things like that. And so I try to take away the person's ability to make it much different. And I think a lot of people don't really, they just don't really see that. They don't see that they can do that. And you have to use it a different way, obviously. But I think that they don't realize that there actually is a lot of technique and a lot of control possibilities in no-gi.
Jared, I had a great time talking with you. Where can people follow you or keep up with you?
So you can add me on Facebook. You just search Jared Dopp. You know what? I made a fan page quite a while ago, and that's just I never even post to it. I feel like I shouldn't have even done that. But I'm somewhat active on Facebook, not that active. You can kind of see more if you follow my Instagram, and that's just at megalodopp. And it's the same for Twitter, at megalodopp on there.
That's great. I'll put links to those in the show notes. Before I let you go, do you have any final words for the audience?
Yeah, man. If anybody has ever thought that what I've said or done is inspiring to you in any way, just please shoot me a message to say, hey, man, I really like what you're doing or whatever. Even if you don't like what I'm doing, you can tell me that too. Messages like that, honestly, kind of keep me motivated also. I like seeing when other people have kind of gone through similar stuff and still managed to make things happen. That inspires me as well.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jared, so much.
Yeah, thanks, Byron.
Man, it was great having Jared Dopp on the show again. It was good to catch up with him and to see what he's up to, and I'm just impressed by his ability to do very difficult things at the same time. Being a PhD student, studying these really complicated things, and trying to help everybody. In reality, he's wanting to do some scientific research that would benefit all of mankind potentially. So I really like that, and also be the best he can at jiu-jitsu. And I really like that he credits being an athlete in the fact that it helps him be a better student. And man, we could all consider that possibility, whether we're students or whether we're going to work or family people, possibly being an athlete or being somebody who practices jiu-jitsu or any other sport, that might help us do better at the things that we're doing off the mat. So just consider that, and maybe some of you guys who are considering, is this worth it? Is this really hard to do everything at once? Maybe you're doing better at your off the mat activities because of jiu-jitsu. Guys, this week we have an article from a kind of a place we don't usually get articles from, WashingtonPost.com. I was just looking at
making the big time.
Yeah, well, we could really pick any article we want in the world. So we do like to have smaller blogs and jiu-jitsu things like that, but I was just looking at stuff for like kids in sports, and this popped up, and I thought it was very interesting. It's titled "Why 70% of Kids Quit Sports by Age 13," and it was written by Juliana Miner. And
man, that's crazy. Just that statistic right there. It's kind of saddening.
Yeah, that is saddening, and it goes into a couple different reasons why this could be happening. The first one is it's not fun anymore, and if you're not real good at it, and it's not that fun, you're not going to stick around. As
you
kids.
Definitely need to have fun.
Yeah. So I don't have any kids. You guys have that experience, so I'll lean on you guys more in this one. What do you guys think about kids losing the fun in sports?
I think that is the big problem. I grew up and I just remember sports equated fun, and that's what I've always thought sports is supposed to be about. And I was talking to Byron a little bit beforehand, before we started the show and before you got on here, Joe. But my boy started off in wrestling, and he wrestled for 4 years. And then one year he told me he doesn't want to wrestle anymore. He wants to play basketball. And, I just kind of asked him why. And he just said it wasn't fun anymore. And, I was like, okay, let's try basketball. And, he has fun at basketball every year. I asked him, do you want to play basketball again? Do you want to wrestle? What do you want to do? I give him the choice. And, basketball is his most fun. But I was telling Byron a little story about, before every game, I always tell him I want to see out there and I want to see a smile on your face when you're playing. I want him to have fun. And, if he ends up, making the high school team down the road, so be it. But I still want him to have fun. And I've been kind of ruined where sports wasn't fun anymore. I've been a basketball player my whole life, and that was my sport. I went to college to play basketball. And my senior year, I quit. I don't like to use the word quit because I don't like to quit anything. But my senior year, I did not play. I just said I'm done. And I lost the fun of sports, of basketball. And it wasn't fun anymore. And it was just weird. I've always had the best time ever playing basketball. And I just got to the point it was a job. It was something I didn't want to do. And so I can kind of know, where my son was going when he was telling me that.
Yeah, I think the author kind of hit on a real key point, and maybe this was part of your experience, Gary. He says, those who stick around find that being on a team means a greater commitment of time and effort. It also means being surrounded by people who care very much about the outcome. And unfortunately, those people that care very much about the outcome are often not the teammates. It's the parents and the coaches and the sponsors. And, you were a senior before you hit this level. But sometimes I think 12, 13-year-old kids who should be having fun, their parents and coaches are very much worried about how many goals did you score, who won the game, who's going to state, who's going to nationals, those kind of outcomes. And that can be saved for later in life. I think at 12, 13, 14 years old, it still needs to be about having fun.
I agree, Joe.
A little further down the article, it talks about the culture doesn't support kids playing for fun. It wants kids to win or to be successful. And the two, I guess if you're winning, it can be fun for sure. But a lot of times, even when you're doing well, you're having to push very hard and that sort of thing, and kind of the fun goes out of it. I'm a little bit on the fence on this because I do want the kids to push themselves and to develop and to meet challenges that aren't necessarily all like, great times, like just playing games all the time. You got to do some scrimmaging, some hard workouts, some things, you have to roll with the guy you don't want to roll with occasionally and that sort of thing, and develop some character in those sort of ways. But like, you have to overall be happy when practice starts. You have to overall be excited to call yourself a blank athlete. I play basketball. I'm a basketball player. Or, I'm a jiu-jitsu person. And if that's no longer the case, I think it's just a matter of time. When the kids aren't excited about jiu-jitsu time and time again, there's only so many of those in a row you could have before you're not excited to take them to jiu-jitsu anymore. And then they don't want to go, you don't want to take them, and it's over. And I don't know. I think that I think jiu-jitsu beats some of these things because the competitive aspect of it isn't always there. Like if you do a sport in school, that will lead to competing within that program.
Games.
Yeah, kids could do jiu-jitsu and they just do jiu-jitsu. Like competition for some kids is always on their mind and they're excited to do it and they want to. Some kids just want to come in and train and do jiu-jitsu. Like, I play the piano and no, I'm not doing big recitals or whatever, but they're learning the skill. I think it's a little easier to do that at a jiu-jitsu school than if you're going to play football, you're going to play in the football game. And like, that's, you know what I mean? It's a little different.
You're talking about, going on, you started out talking about the culture no longer supports older kids playing for the fun of it. And another thing that we were talking about before we came on the air and before you were there, Joe, was my boy plays basketball now, and his basketball team is terrible this year. I mean, they haven't won a game. And it was crazy because a parent came over to me before a game yesterday and it's like, hey, how's Connor, taking to the team? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, yeah, my kid, he's really upset, because they're losing everything. And I was like, no, it really hasn't. I haven't heard Connor say one bad thing about them losing. It's just he's out there having fun. But another thing that happened was one of the coaches, my boy's a smaller kid. He's probably the smallest kid on the team. And he knows my boy used to wrestle and everything. And he was telling me that because middle school is coming next year, he was telling me that, hey, I might want to get Connor back into wrestling because Connor's not very tall and he's probably not going to go anywhere in basketball. And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. It's, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm glad he told that to me instead of Connor, because sometimes the coach hears that and, basically is going to take that coach's word. And, and like I was telling Byron, is like the crazy thing is, I may be a little biased, but I think Connor's the best player on the team, on that team by far. But I was telling Byron, I told Connor about that afterwards, and Connor's like, well, I want to prove him wrong. He's like, let's work really hard so I can make the team next year. And I just thought that was awesome that, he's going to take that as growth, as motivation. But I just think it's terrible because that goes back to that culture. We put kids into what we think they can do or not. It's like, hey, your kid's not very tall. Who knows if he's going to hit a growth spurt, or tell that to Spud Webb, who played in the NBA at 5'5", or Muggsy Bogues at 5'3". Guys can do it. Don't let somebody tell you can't do something, and you're never going to do it. So I'm just glad we learned lessons from a bad job by a coach.
Yep, Gary, that's a good example of a coach having the potential to take all the fun out of it for a kid. So
yeah.
Glad Connor's got the right attitude and pushing forward. And I mean, sometimes you're not built for the sport you're playing anyway. That's just the facts of life. But no, it sounds like he's got the right attitude.
Yep. And Joe, me and you are a little bit older. I'd like to go on to point.
I am a little bit older.
Yeah. But Joe, you remember back in our day, it's I played every sport that was going on in the neighborhood. If it was football season, we played football. If it was baseball season, we played baseball. And we all played all sorts of sports. And the next point this author is getting to, there's a clear push for kids to specialize and achieve at the highest possible level. And, I look at my nieces who are very, very good softball players. And, they've just devoted themselves to softball. They play year round. They have a hitting coach, on top of their regular practices. Like they go to a specific place and pay somebody to be their hitting coach. And, they have these bags that are on rollers that cost like probably $200 just to carry their $600 worth of gear, their $400 bat, their $200 glove. And I remember back when I used to play, man, I'd get a cheap old glove for $20. I'd find some used wooden bat, and I'd put the glove over my bat, put it on my shoulder, and ride my Huffy to practice. And just the way the time has changed. And I played every sport that was there. We never specialized in anything. I never had extra coaches on the side. And today, that specialization has really changed sports.
Yeah, Gary, that's a great point, and it kind of dovetails in with his final point, I think, which is there's a cost to be competitive, and not everyone is willing or able to pay that cost. Where I live, football's real big in Texas, but at the younger ages, it seems like it's baseball and soccer that are real big, and they get into these travel teams where you have your local 8 or 10 teams in town that play, and then of the best of those kids all join a team and they go play regionally or nationally. And it kind of gets to the point where if you're not good enough to be on those travel teams, it gets real discouraging. And those are the kids that drop out. But like you pointed out, Gary, it takes a huge commitment, both in time and money, to make it work. I mean, parents are spending money to send kids to camps and buy special equipment. And as a society, I think we sometimes go too far that direction. We've got a local church in our town that does upward sports, and they have a basketball league and a flag football league. And it's like, I don't know, 7 years old to 12 or 13 years old. And it's really all the kids who not necessarily aren't good enough to be on the highly competitive teams, but maybe that's just not what motivates them. So it gives them an opportunity to get the benefits from being in sports without having to be a part of that rat race, so to speak. So I'm a big fan of these community projects where kids can play sports and not have to pay the high price to be competitive or worry about specializing or some of this other stuff.
Yeah, another point she has in the article is that sometimes it's just the age. Like that 13-ish age, school gets more challenging. There's other activities that are going on that are important as well.
Girls and boys.
A lot of distractions. If they do decide to leave something like jiu-jitsu, try to line it up in a way that it would be easier to come back to if they get the interest again. And that's definitely, I don't know what that looks like, but it's definitely not keep pushing them until they hate it. It's if they're 13 years old and they're struggling with school, maybe they should take a little bit of time off of the mats and do better in school. Maybe, I think that's pretty normal. But if you keep pushing them, or no time to be interested in, other people or whatever, it might have a negative reaction that lasts a lot longer than. I think the point that like these kids are quitting sports, that's disappointing. But the unfortunate thing is adults don't know how to exercise. Like the sports that we play as kids don't translate well over to adults mostly.
Good point.
Like football. How many guys our age are playing football? Like not professionally, for fun, for exercise. They don't do it. So, okay, that's a waste. I ran in junior high. I still run today. That wouldn't actually translate it over okay. But, basketball, jumping and landing and not getting hurt, that's injury prone, I think. But there are little basketball leagues and stuff like that. It's kind of like jiu-jitsu. Like you could play that a little bit better as an adult. You see softball tournaments pop up now and then. People get injured, like the weekend warrior comes out and tries to play, and I don't know. There's different sports, but the goal of it should be the kids are picking up these tools to learn how to stay fit. And if they think that fitness or sports are not for them, that's a terrible lesson to learn. It's way better than never won a championship and to be exercising into their 50s and 40s, whatever, and being somebody who's a fit person than to have that little trophy that they won back in the 10th grade or whatever.
Well, you remember, Byron, I would have won the state championship in football if Coach would have just put me in.
Man, those are the days of our lives back then.
Uncle Rico.
Yeah, but Gary was too busy bringing the team quality H2O.
Bobby Boucher. Just going by this article, it made me start thinking about It seems like kids jiu-jitsu is growing though, and maybe other sports are dropping out. And Byron, you gave some points about jiu-jitsu, why it may be working, but it seems like I look at kids classes. I can look at Fox Fitness, and man, I just see pictures of the kids classes that it just grows all the time. I see a lot of local schools. I know Justin Rader, has a great kids school there at Legacy is really growing too. And I don't know. I wonder if jiu-jitsu, kind of like what you said, Byron, because you can be competitive in jiu-jitsu where you can compete every other weekend, or you can just show up and go through the motions. I mean, not go through the motions, make it sound like it's terrible, but show up and have a smile on your face and tap your friends out and not compete. I wonder if that's one of the reasons, because to me, it seems like I don't know if anybody's ever done a study, but it seems like kids sports, jiu-jitsu is growing, not declining.
Yeah. When you're in those wonder years and you're like on one of those competitive teams, that could eat up a whole weekend of the entire family. Like, okay, we're going to go play a baseball tournament 1 or 2 states away. That's the weekend. Versus jiu-jitsu, you could have those weekends if you want them. They are not required. You could also have,
good point.
Some schools pick up kids at school. They have them, and you can pick them up from practice at 5:30 or whenever practice is done. Super convenient and easy, and the kids get all the benefits of being on a team and working out and self-defense. I don't know. It's pretty easy to sell jiu-jitsu to the crowd we're talking to now.
Yeah, and you said something important there, Byron, and it's family. Family matters. And, if you can do something as a family, the wife, the kids, everybody together, that goes a long ways towards making it a little more sustainable, I think. You could basically say it's happy days.
Yeah.
You got that right, Fonzie.
Hey. We'll put a link to this article in the show notes. Check it out. And just, it's like anything when you're training jiu-jitsu, like that blue belt, you want that purple belt, whatever. Like, the whole point of it is not to get the next belt. There's so much more going on than that. So the whole point of the kid winning a tournament or having these great things with his teammates and doing super well, really, in the end of it, you want an adult who is fit. And so hopefully some of these sports programs are teaching them life fitness. That could include eating right and healthy and that fitness is for them and how to work out. I still do, like most of my stretches, I'll go, if I start stretching like I learned back in junior high, like in gym class. It's very similar to that. Like, I know a lot more stretches than that, but like my little brain walks out of my head and I just go through some motions of stretching. It'll be my junior high style of stretching.
But the best is, while he's stretching, he's still wearing the junior high shorts. So he attracts a crowd when he's doing that.
Oh, man. Yeah, when Gary and I
he's got that
together,
athletic supporter on as well. So.
Gary and I would often stretch together. They just call us the odd couple. We'll put a link to that.
If I go with you, would it be Three's Company?
Yes, it would.
Okay, Jack Tripper.
I want to quickly mention our supporters, since Gary's mentioning supporters, or maybe that was Joe.
That was Joe. Come on, Byron. I think your brain's not working right. You've self-asphyxiated too much. Oh, different strokes for different folks. Gary. I'll just leave. That was a good one there. Good one, Byron.
Okay. To bring it back to professionalism. No, we want to thank our Patreon supporters. They are truly supporting this podcast in ways they probably don't even fully understand. We don't have a giant list of Patreon supporters. Each person that gets on there, like I'll tell you this much. Every time we get a new supporter, I tell my wife, hey, we got a new Patreon supporter. Like, if I'm at work and, we make a call on somebody who's dead or we make a house fire, whatever, she may not hear about that. But every time I get a Patreon supporter, I'm like, hey, we got a new Patreon. It's exciting to me. I really get a kick out of it because it does mean that we're growing and we're doing the right things. And and we're able to do more. So I want to give a quick shout out to current Patreon supporters, David, Mindy, Mark, and our newest one is Sarah. Thank you guys for supporting us on Patreon. Joe or Gary, tell us a little bit how Patreon works.
Well, if you are a fan of content providers, whether they have a YouTube channel, or in this case we have a YouTube channel, but we also have a podcast, which we rely on Patreon supporters to help us with. If you are a fan of people that provide content and you support their show, you can go on to Patreon and you can contribute a little bit of cash to help us out. Most of our supporters provide $1 an episode, and that money goes to help us buy equipment that is needed, maybe pay some travel if we need to go someplace, and it helps to grow the show. So we appreciate it very much. Yep.
You guys mean so much. Send you out all the cool stuff that's described there. 5-inch BjjBrick gi patch, a BjjBrick sticker. I'll send those to you anywhere in the world. We'll throw a international postage stamp on that, and you could be likely the only one in your gym, maybe even the only one in your country. I've only emailed a few of these out to different countries, so that's kind of cool. They could be yours.
Man, I feel like I butchered that. You caught me off guard with that, Byron.
No, you did good. I explained it several times in a row. It's like, let's have somebody else take a swing at it. we got a full house here. We can make this happen.
Yeah. Joe, you mentioned our Facebook page or our YouTube page, and I mentioned it earlier too about checking out Josh Hinger's DVD review by Byron. Check out the YouTube page, BjjBrick. There's a lot of content on there. Also, the shows are put on there too, so you can check that out. We're also on Facebook. That's our big one there. If you have any questions, send us an email, bjjbrick@gmail.com. We're on Twitter, so we're a lot of different places.
Yeah.
And if you'd like a transcript of the show, go back and listen to it again and write down everything you hear.
Hey, guys, that's maybe why we should use the subtitles, and we can just take pictures of them and post them.
That makes no sense to anybody listening. Gary accidentally had we were calling on Skype here, and Gary had subtitles clicked on it. It was actually typing what we were saying somewhat accurately and displaying on the screen. He thought we were messing with him. Gary, we wouldn't mess with you like that, man.
Oh, yeah, no, not at all.
That's too much work.
It's never happened before.
Never. But you do have a great audiobook coming out this
I knew
this
that
holiday
was
season. And it's
Byron, what would it be, Byron?
Well, good. Glad you asked, Gary. And if you're new to the show, this is the portion of the show we sometimes do this, not always. But on special days like today, you get an audiobook. And I'll throw or Joe or me or whoever will get thrown a topic at them and have to come up with a kind of an idea of an audiobook on the spot. Or a regular book. Sometimes these have been coloring books.
We actually had a
pop-up book, educational DVDs, in-class instructionals, whatever. The world's out there, Gary. You teach this subject however you want. This is called... I think this is actually a seminar Gary's going to go around and teach to the business world. It's called Attacking the Customer. This is Gary's guide to keeping the employees happy.
Yeah, well, Byron, first of all, before we get into attacking the customer...
Which you almost did two old ladies that were customers.
Yeah, I was actually going to have an audiobook for you. Why 30% of the kids don't quit sports by the age of 13. And I was just sitting there thinking when you were, I was like, if Byron throws that one out there, you can tell me and him, we've hung out too much. But no, my book, Attacking the Customer. And you think about it. What's your goal in business? We want to make money, right? We want to make as much money as possible. That's putting money into our pocket.
That's classic. That's a classic Al Bundy line, like from Married with Children.
Yep, Al Bundy, another jiu-jitsu guy. He's a black belt. He's so perfect. I'm glad I quoted him, even though I don't know if that's a quote from him.
No, probably not.
Yeah, but the big thing is a lot of times the customers will say no. They say no a lot of times, and that's why one of the big things that we're going to learn in Chapter 1 is jiu-jitsu. We talk about jiu-jitsu in Byron's audiobook for only $11.99, the benefits of it. We talk about, health issues, weight issues, strength, self-defense, camaraderie, social, maternal, all those different aspects. But never once did Byron talk about, business. And what we're going to use that for, jiu-jitsu, is we're going to make the customer say yes. So let's just think about Joe comes to my house to buy, he wants to look at the weight bench I posted for sale on Craigslist. Joe comes by and I have that thing offered. It says $250 firm. And so Joe comes over and he sees it and he likes it and he wants it because he wants to increase his bench press. Like right now, Joe's benching 45 pounds.
I like your three qual. He sees it, he likes it, he wants it. That just sounds bad.
Joe wants to get up to 55 pound bench.
He wants to look like the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, well, yeah. So that's what he wants to do. But so Joe offers me $200. I'm not going to take $200. But how can I make Joe pay me $250? Because we know he has it. I mean, just look at his new truck. We know he's got it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to twist his arm, literally. And, that could be a Kimura. We could use an arm bar. I mean, I may even, asphyxiate him. I may, triangle choke him. But I will get Joe to sign a contract that he's going to pay me $250. I will make him write it. Or he may not get out of there alive. So, I mean, it's a great way to really increase your revenue and sales.
As sure as the world turns, Joe's going to sign that contract.
Yeah.
No, Joe's not going to sign that contract. Joe knows better than to chase down any Craigslist ad with an address in Gary's neighborhood. I'm not going there.
Okay, so let's just say Joe walks into the local store that I work at. Let's say I work at Buffalo Wild Wings, and Joe's coming in to watch the UFC fight because Buffalo Wild Wings a lot of times will show it. And Joe, my boss, has told me we have extra Caribbean jerk seasoning, so we need to sell a lot of Caribbean jerk wings, and that's my goal. My boss said that's what we needed to get rid of. So, Joe comes over there and he tries to order just mild wings. Do you think I'm going to take that, guys? No, I'm not.
You're going to show him who's the boss.
Yeah, we're going to show him a lot of times because Joe's seated. Tell me I can't come up behind him easily and put a rear naked choke on. And you put it on hard at first, and right before he passes out, you let go. Let a little bit of blood in there, and then put a pencil in his hand and make him sign for it. The other benefit to that?
Joe's going to be the Caribbean.
Gary, anytime you try and sell me a menu item that has jerk in the description, I'm not interested.
Well, I'm telling you, Joe, it works. It works. Just 3 easy steps. And it's done wonders for me in my business career.
Okay.
I feel like I've been dropped into the Twilight Zone with Gary's sales techniques. He also is a wizard at dealing with unhappy customers. I remember, attending one of your business seminars, and you were telling a story about how the customer was irate that their food was so slow getting to them, and you didn't put up with that either.
No, don't ever let the customer speak to you. Once they try to speak, you just keep interrupting. They will get so upset. And think about it. Can you fight very well when you're upset? What happens? Your adrenaline starts going. You gas out quickly. I will not let you get a word in, and I'm going to get you so upset that you're going to swing at me. And what happens when you swing at me? I got 2 choices. I can call the cops, or I can stand my ground. And so I got my choice, and that person's going to end up looking like the bad person. So never let them get a word in. Try to upset them as much as possible so they want to start swinging at you.
So, this book, it's been released a little while ago here, and a lot of people are saying that customers are mad about you giving this advice to people.
Well, the only reason they're mad because many of them have gotten beat up. But you want to know what part of business that has helped? Jiu-jitsu schools.
I thought you were going to say Home Depot, like the home improvement style business.
A lot of people now, first of all, you think about what my book talks about. Chapter 1, we tell everybody in the customer service industry to train jiu-jitsu so that we can, manhandle the customer. Then at the very end of the book, if the customer reads it, it tells the customer to also train jiu-jitsu so that they can even the tables and get a better deal on stuff. So let's say, Gary, go ahead, Joe. Yes.
At its core, is this book a crime story? Is this like True Detective or something?
No, it's not at all. It's kind of like what I like to consider a nursery rhyme.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh man!
But it is rated R.
Gary, some of the ideas.
The movie's coming out next year. So I mean, we've got a lot of big stars that want to be in this movie. So I mean, it's kind of neat. All the people that want to be in this.
Oh, please tell me you're going to have Mr. T in this.
No, Mr. T, no.
Man, because from the A Team, I love that guy.
He would pay the fool that would disagree with the cut with the.
Yeah, I think we're going to get Lou Ferrigno instead.
Okay, all right,
yeah.
All right.
Yep.
I remember, Gary, when you were selling TVs to people who didn't really need to buy a TV, and they came out with these new color TVs, and it was like in living color in your house, your whole family gathered around there watching the show, all in the family together. You really pushed hard on that, and
those were definitely the wonder years, Byron.
That's true.
Though, I think I just heard our little ticker go off. I've been saved by the bell to get out of this episode.
So what do you mean by that, Gary?
I heard the alarm go off that we spent too much time on this.
Okay. Ding, ding, ding.
How many TV titles did you hear in this episode, Gary?
32.
That might be close.
It might be.
Well, I didn't know where you're going, and I was like, well, Byron, that was pretty impressive there.
I threw in a couple in a row, and I think that kind of backfired.
Yeah.
I got greedy. I've been checking them off the list here. So, just to bring you up to speed, Gary, we've been saying TV titles the whole episode. All but the interview.
So have I.
I've caught a couple of yours. What have you worked in there, Gary?
I've worked in Happy Days.
Yeah,
I've worked in Wonder Years. I've worked in Saved by the Bell. I've worked in F Troop.
Gary, I think you're taking credit for our work.
No, that's what I've thrown in there.
That's nice. We've got here, tell me if you don't recognize any of these from the episode. Growing Pains.
I didn't recognize that one.
Three's Company.
I recognize that one. I said Jack Tripper.
That's true.
Yep.
The Twilight Zone.
I didn't recognize that one.
Threw that in there. Who's the Boss?
I recognize that one. Alyssa Milano, how can you not?
The Love Boat.
I recognize that one.
That was when Joe was talking about his boat. Married with Children, you got me on that one. Joe had Quantum Leap. I think you commented on that. Happy Days.
Oh, well, I did on Quantum Leap, but I didn't get it. I didn't know you were going that way. No.
Yeah, that was early in the process.
Yeah.
Yep.
Different Strokes was very nicely inserted into an odd time.
You know what the crazy thing is I just went along and threw my own out there.
Yes, you did.
That's the cool part.
I think we got the Facts of Life in there, All in the Family, The Odd Couple. Did you hear those?
Yeah.
Good Times.
I don't know if I heard that one.
Joe wants to use the workout bench to look like the Incredible Hulk.
I said that one, didn't I?
I think you might have repeated it, but I think
well, no. You know what's crazy is you said the Incredible Hulk, and somehow I threw in Lou Ferrigno later.
Got into your subconscious.
Yeah, it probably did.
Man, I like how Byron, you stuck the Magic School Bus in there. That one wasn't easy.
I don't know that movie.
You didn't recall that one?
It's a TV show. It's a TV show.
A kid's show.
I don't know that one.
Days of Our Life was snuck in there. As the World Turns.
You threw in Days of Our Lives, and I was like, what the freak is he throwing in soap operas for? That's exactly what I thought. I was like, man, that dude is weird.
Walker, Texas Ranger.
Man, I didn't get, I remember you threw that one in there, but
Full House.
That was good. I knew you threw that
Saved
one
by the Bell. You nailed me. Who said Saved by the Bell?
That was me. You said it.
I said it.
Right?
And I put a star by that because I got busted on that one immediately. Mad About You, Law and Order. You got to keep Law and Order in that bank, Gary.
Man, how did you get all those in there? That's impressive. So when did you guys plan this? Because I was the first one on the call.
Oh, Gary, we've been planning stuff for weeks. We got stuff in the making, my man.
Well, you remember how last week
Joe got King of the Hill
for like 10 minutes before you guys even knew it?
Yeah.
Because I was trying to figure out what you guys were going to mess with me about. I just saw it and it's like, hey, I wonder if I can just join this call. And I was like, I'm just going to be quiet because they're probably going to plan something against me.
That's true.
And we waited for a week.
Yeah.
You know the show Spin City?
No, I don't.
I think I said Spin This City or something like that.
Yeah,
Home
you
Improvement
got that
got
one,
thrown
though.
in. In Living Color. Did you remember that one, Gary?
Yep. You were talking about me selling the TVs.
There you go. Starsky and Hutch. Joe got that one.
That was early.
Yep.
Family Matters was smooth. I don't remember how you got it in there, Joe, but it was pretty smooth.
Did you catch that one, Gary?
Yeah, we were talking. It was about training. You know, the family needs to train together. Family Matters.
I think, is True Detective a TV show? I'm guessing it was. I don't know that one.
Yes.
See, you said something about True Detective, but I didn't know where you were going. I didn't know the movie show.
And then the 18, we were talking about TV. Any other ones I missed, Joe? I didn't have. I have the list here of the ones that we originally thought of, but Joe looked outside the box.
I didn't really
a little bit.
keep track. I got a couple of websites open with top TV shows, and I was just kind of perusing them while we were talking.
I printed off. I was crossing them off as we went.
You should have somehow got Welcome Back Kotter in there.
I was thinking about that one. I just couldn't fit it in.
One day at a time.
In fact, we were talking about school, approaching jiu-jitsu as school, like going back to school. Gary, you were talking about that, and I was trying to figure out a way to welcome back Cotter.
Yeah. Throw in MASH somehow, like
Mash the guy in side control.
Bottom of side control, yeah.
I think Saved by the Bell was pretty much dead in the water as soon as, like, how do you say that without catching the show? I mean, I don't know. That one, I knew that one was going to fail when I said it.
Well, shoot, I thought mine was good at the end when I used it to save me.
Yeah, but yeah. Oh, yeah, good times, Gary.
I like it. Yeah, good times. There's another one.
Dang.
I guess you could say we're moving on up to the east side.
All right, well, stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to watch reruns.
Yeah, train hard, train smart, and get better, guys. We'll see you on the mats.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.